welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of a novel that I read in what I would call 1.5 sittings. It wasn't really like a quite full sitting the second time, but I could not put this down. It is at once a lot of fun and deeply stressful, and I really love the combination of those things at times. It's such a fun ride. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
So thank you so much, Jen, for having me here. I was telling Jen how much I love her interviews. I am Bonnie Friedman, and I am the author of a debut novel called Don't Stop. And the way I would describe the novel is it's about a woman with a secret life. Maybe we'll get into that later. I've been always interested in women with secret lives. And in the case of this character, she is an academic, she's a scholar, and she falls into an affair that she doesn't quite know how to get out of because it's both very pleasurable and for other reasons as well. She can't stop seeing this man, even though it's starting to have terrible effects on the rest of her life. So that's the way I think about Don't Stop.
And the title is so great too. It's such a great encapsulation, the main character's journey, and it's the words itself are a recurring theme throughout the book. But before I get too ahead of myself, I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your career and your journey as a writer, and perhaps also, if you don't mind, the magnificent cat that is in your author photo on your website.
So
Yeah.
glad. Mochi. That's how we'll get to Mochi. Oh my God, he's gigantic. Yeah, he's like a toddler. He's 20 pounds. I dread picking him up. So I wanted to say that I grew up in the Bronx, and when I was growing up, we did not buy books. My mother did not believe in buying books, so we had a pilgrimage to the Francis Martin Library, and I loved librarians. I thought they lived in the library. They knew so much and they made the place beautiful. And I thought that they lived on the proceeds when you had an overdue book and you had to pay, the pennies and the dimes and nickels. But I always revered the libraries, but for so many reasons. And when I was growing up, I was a Girl Scout, and there was only one merit badge I wanted, which was the writer, and it had a blue background, like sky blue, and a quill pen in the front. And as soon as I got that merit badge, I was done. Like the other girls were like generals; they had like rows and rows and rows of badges. But like I was so narrow in my interests. Hopefully, they've brought in since then. But I was lucky. I did pursue becoming a writer, and my first 3 books are nonfiction. So this is my first novel. And I'll say that the reason that I wrote nonfiction is I needed to figure out things about my own life and come to an understanding of them. And I use the essay form. Often when I begin an essay, I'll know maybe 2/3 of what I'm writing about. And the last third, it's like a prosthetic arm. You reach further than you know, and you come to a greater understanding. And that's the thrill for me of essay writing. So my first book was called Writing Past Dark, and it's about issues in writers' lives. The Center for Fiction said it was one of the 10 essential books for writers. So I was really, really, really proud of that and happy about that. And then at a certain point in my life, I wanted to write something that was less planned out and more steeping the reader in an experience. And so I needed to learn how to write a novel, which is very, very different from the essay form. To write something, a book length that immerses the reader, that has velocity. There was so much I needed to learn. So that's a little bit about my journey. And the cat is a Maine Coon cat that has like huge amount of fur, big squirrel tail, and extremely intelligent, and unfortunately woke me today at 6 in the morning howling for some
Oh
reason.
no.
As soon as I was awake, he fell asleep.
I always like to go to an author's website if they have one because I feel like it's a nice little insight into their, personality. And Mochi just like his face is so distinguished. He's making eye contact with the camera in a really wonderful way. Like I'm going to recommend every viewer go check out this picture and this cat because yeah,
Oh,
absolutely love him.
that's so great because there's a publicist at the publishing company, and she said, I went to your website and there's just pictures of cats. And I'm like, yes, and the problem is.
Yeah. No, cats and writing go together very well, I think. That's great. So, what was the inception point for Don't Stop? Was it a particular character, a mood, or a theme you wanted to explore, a setting? What was the seed from which the project germinated?
Well, I wanted to write about a character who, like myself, was a very good girl, very obedient, very rule abiding. And then at a certain point in her life, aspects of herself that she had no idea she was repressing come to the fore and overtake her. And I think that that's what happens to people often. I mean, I think I like novels about that too, where there's a journey of discovery that needs to happen. And I was very interested in writing about a woman who found out that the things that appealed to her erotically were things she never imagined she would be compelled by. And so she's sort of shocked by herself. And at the same time, she doesn't want to close the door and say no because she thinks I might never have this experience again. This is my one life, and I want to go wherever this is going. So she agrees like a voice comes out of her, a deep voice comes out of her doing erotic things. I'll just say, some of it is she's a feminist, and she's a professor, and she's very surprised to find out that she's gratified by taking orders, like erotic orders, to do things. It just so doesn't compute with her sense of herself. And I wanted to explore that situation, and also I wanted to. It's so high. I think it's very hard to find language for ecstatic experiences where, a lot of writers write about it in a kind of breezy way or dismissive way. And I wanted to find a language that would do justice to this character's experience. So that was some of the inspiration in the book.
Nice. Yeah, I have a lot of questions after about the language and writing the erotic. But before that, I sort of have a question about, I guess, like how women's midlife experiences have been treated in literature. Well, I think, do you think it's fair to say that I think like traditionally men's midlife crises have gotten much more attention and perhaps like a lot more dignity sometimes and nuance, in how they are portrayed. And so I really appreciate that we are sort of in this period where sort of women's midlife experiences are being treated with the same level of attention and care and nuance, stuff like that. So with all that in mind, could you talk a little bit about shaping Ina, your main character, where she is in life and yeah, how you shaped her personality, I guess, with attention to like your storytelling goals.
That's a great, and yeah, I wanted to say the word dignity is exactly the word I had in mind when you started that question about men's midlife crises, that they are treated with dignity as something very important. And women's, I think, just as you're saying, has been considered, just much more frivolous, as women's lives in general have been considered, of much less, importance. So yes, I really love that question and that framing. Now, what was the rest of your question had to do with how I conceived of the character? Is that right?
Yeah, like shaping her personality, specifically with like, a mind to the journey that she would experience without revealing anything you don't want revealed.
So great. So I wanted to make her a woman who was, accomplished and intellectual, and yet had something that she was struggling with. So my character is a Eugene O'Neill scholar, and she has to write a book in order to keep her university job, as is often the case. They need you to publish something in your field that really makes a contribution. It's not easy to especially somebody that's been studied so much. So at the beginning of the novel, my character Ina has this wall full of post-its in which she's put down different insights about Eugene O'Neill, and yet the book is not coming together, and she feels under a great deal of pressure to pull it together. And she has been struggling all summer with writing the book. And at the very opening of the novel, she kind of has this feeling that something is constellating, and she thinks of it as the way, like before a storm at the beginning, sometimes the leaves turn over, the green turns to silver as the leaves turn over, and something electrifying is in the air. And she could sense it, like this presence, that this figure is approaching her. Something is approaching her, and it turns out to be the man that she becomes involved with, who she decides, um, by involving myself with him, I'll learn something that will help me actually write my book. And she's not altogether wrong about that, because Eugene O'Neill's writing is very visceral, and he based it on experiences that he had at sea and with his family. And to my scholar at the beginning of the book, it's all language and imagery and symbols. It's very ungrounded. So the experience she has in grounding herself actually helps her appreciate what he was doing much more. Also, I just do want to say I was hoping for a comic tone at the outset. And so allowing her to be slightly, really up in her head and very judgmental of other people was fun to write. I was, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really fun to spend time in her worldview and her mental landscape. You sort of like perfectly predicted my next question. So for a little preface, I am myself a recovering academic. Before I was a librarian, I was going to be a medieval historian, and I'm much happier here, so it's a happy ending and all that. But when I was in academia, I used to love to use people's research interests and focus as a sort of like, reading the entrails to sort of like try to understand them psychologically. So
Yes.
it sounds like that was something that you thought about too.
I did think about that. I did think about that. She doesn't know this, but she's drawn to Eugene O'Neill because he's a great truth teller. He was very interested in hypocrisy, in the way these like late Victorian, these American people who were very proper. His mother was very caught up with being very proper, having the right home, the right, outfit. And he was quite aware of the tensions within people that he wanted to expose that. So very often his characters will like blurt something out, and then he'll say, "Oh, forget I said that. That was madness. I had no idea why I said that." His characters are saying that all the time. Like they say this true thing that might be a little mean or have claws or something, and then they'll go, "I didn't mean that at all." And so, I think part of what draws her to Eugene O'Neill is that he is like Aeschylus. He's like a great, stony, frightening truth teller that she's kind of like both drawn to and frightly terrified of too, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a little bit of what draws her to Jack as well. So could you talk a little bit about Jack and Simon, sort of building the two men that are in her life at this moment and those dynamics?
Oh, that is such a fun question, fun to think about. Jack is the man she becomes involved with, and he's a musician. He's a composer, and this was so fun to write. He's writing a musical based on Goodbye Columbus by Philip Roth. So I love the movie of Goodbye and the book too. So that was fun to think like where would the musical numbers be in Goodbye Columbus? Like that was a lot of fun. He's an intuitive person. He's very he has a lot of gifts of being able to be intimate. So one of the things I was thinking about, books that teach you about novel writing often say that your character should have something that they want and that they think they want, but underneath that is their real want. So she thinks she just wants to know about sex, but actually it's a doorway to intimacy. And that kind of throws her. And Jack is very good at intimacy. There's a lot about him that makes him not a great life choice to live with. For one thing, he's sexist.
Yeah.
He's, he's a heavy smoker. He keeps weird hours. I mean, he has a lot that is marvelous about him, but there's a lot about him that Ina has to kind of like ignore to continue on. And the erotic thrall is so great, she does ignore it. And Simon, who's the man that she's married to, is a Texan who grew up in a fundamentalist household, is a straight arrow, is a good guy, and something is lacking in the marriage that she has not wanted to deal with. And I actually think it's not an uncommon situation where, something is good enough, and it's hard to really focus on what's the problem, and the problem seems to keep shifting around. And one says, okay, this is a good enough situation. I'm gonna, stay with this. Life is working well enough for me. And then something happens that kidnaps you, and you realize, like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was missing out on this other thing, and now I have a problem. What do I do?
What's so interesting to me about that, about particularly when you put it together with like the academic setting for Ina's career. In academia, there is this like real pressure to kind of like perform yourself, as like a professional and as like a master of your studies, your area of expertise. And you're supposed to kind of like live your ideals in a way. And so academia can be like a performance. And I think that's actually the part that I couldn't master. That's why I'm in libraries. Um, and so it's sort of like Ina, like I think after a while you conflate yourself with the performance, right? And something eventually will reveal to you that like the performance is not actually you. There's something under there that you kind of lost.
Yes, I used to feel that. Used to teach at the University of North Texas. I was in the English department, creative writing. And Jen, I'd say like as I was approaching the classroom, I would get more and more anxious, more and more tense. And then as I crossed the threshold, it felt like this persona just dropped over me. And she taught the class. Thank God she always showed up. I was underneath the bed in my pajamas, like making friends with the lint bunnies, calling them by name. And, this other aspect that generated thoughts and sentences stood in front of the classroom. But I know exactly what you mean about feeling like, oh, there's this divided life, there's this persona. And also, you're supposed to, behave in a particular way. I think that's part of what troubles Ina is that she doesn't think she's supposed to like the things that she likes. And maybe she shouldn't.
Yeah.
There's something comforting to her in somebody else taking control. And I do agree with you. The academic life is full of pressure, especially before one gets tenure, and she doesn't have tenure yet. I loved having like writing that divide. And then to have her come, she at a certain point she comes in to teach somebody else's class, and she's deep into her affair at that point, and she just thinks, I can't even make sense the way I used to make sense. Something is welling up in her.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's so, gosh, where was I going to go with that? Let me see. Oh, I did have a thought too about how like, it feels very unique to academia to me too, where you can be like 41, 42 and be like early career, like there's even though you are like so competent, you are so educated, so wise, like most of your age mates are not considered early career. They are well into like professional development kind of stuff. So there's this weird combination of like arrested development with like an intense need to perform a particular kind of maturity.
I think that is so well seen. That is really true. Because when I think about 41, that's right. Most people are mid-career. They've achieved a very great deal. And here she's really, in a way starting out, and that it's not unusual in academia. I think I got myself got my first tenure track. I was like I might have been in my early 50s or something. I mean, it was like, people take unusual routes
Mhm.
to end up, teaching at a university. I took quite a long time to get there myself.
So finally, my question about writing the erotic, and by that I don't just mean sex. Like there's so much eroticism in this that is like not sex too. Um, I'm really curious about how you navigate what to show, what not to show, and writing the erotic from the point of view of an intellectualizer, like somebody whose job is not being in their body.
Right.
Mhm.
That's right. Right. I thought a very great deal about that. As a matter of fact, because it's a book that has sexual energy. It's one of the issues it's dealing with. A woman who wants to be in control. And yet, by very definition, this is an aspect of ourselves that we can't control. We can lie about it or we can tell the truth about it, but I think it's the joy and the horror of it is that it is not within our control. So I I have to tell you, in an early draft of it, a friend of mine read it, a guy read it, and he said, like, Bonnie, you have to make it much more juicy. I mean, this is a book about a woman having an affair, and it's not yet on the page, so I had to go back and think about it, which is so weird to think about, like, well, how much do I need to convey to the reader so that they could come along with the character? And yet I don't, I'm not writing pornography, and nor do I want it to be clinical. And I have to say that what was most important for me is to get the mood of it, the feeling of it. So there was one image that kept coming up. I mean, so much so that the editor said, "Okay, we've had that before," which is sort of like at the periphery of people feeling as if their molecules are kind of like floating into the air, and the other person's is too, and like your boundaries are blurred. I wanted to get that feeling state of the boundaries being blurred, of a certain sort of euphoric feeling. And I think with my character, it is very hard for her to understand that that's important. And I think, those of us who grew up in an intellectual background, the most important thing was studying and doing well intellectually and having ideas. So it is very hard to think that this other stuff is actually important. And that's part of her problem, is that because she doesn't, yet at a certain point, she's thinking, gee, it's upending my life to be with this guy. It's having a lot of different effects with her parents and her career, let alone her husband and her best friend. And she wants to leave him. But it's, one thing I came, the AA people are here before me. It is very hard to give something up if you don't acknowledge it's real.
Mm.
So, the first step is to acknowledge that you're out of control about something, and it's important and it's actually happening. So as long as she tells herself this isn't important, she keeps going back to him. That so I thought a great deal about that too. Very fun to write. But anyway, that's a great question about the erotic, and thinking about people who we read where they carry us into the experience without it becoming, pornographic,
Mhm.
which I
Yep.
didn't want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it gets at that tension between like, this is a journey of self-discovery for her in her framing, but that sort of eroticism or sensuality is about like losing yourself as well, because you have to sort of give in to that fact that you have no control, that this thing exists and you are powerless in front of it. Yeah, it's just such a fun, like it's, we've been talking about a lot of like the heady ideas behind it, but it also is just, it's so funny and so fun. And it's such a great ride. So thank you for coming and talking about it with me and our listeners. I'm so excited to share it with them.
A great conversation. Thank you so much, Jen. I loved great questions, wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show and enjoying the book. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And just before we go, what's next for you? Do you think there's another novel in you or what are you working on?
I do have another novel. I have an idea for a novel. I lived next door to a woman who invited me to go through her home at one point, and she always was very well put together, older woman. And she said, as she was bringing me to her home, she said, "Don't judge me." And I went in, and there were newspapers up to the ceiling, and there were just pathways through, corridors that she lived in. Apparently, she was a hoarder. And so I was very interested in writing a novel about a person who's a hoarder, but has to stop hoarding. In the case of this woman, she was worried that her landlord was going to kick her out. And I was thinking, I like writing experiences of people having to be launched out into the world, into something uncomfortable. So I'd love to write about this character, this hoarder that lived in the building next door.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. Well, I look forward to that one too. And thank you. Happy writing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. Please check out Don't Stop. As we are recording on release day, which is a lovely thing. So it will be out in the world by the time that you hear this. You can go to your favorite bookstore or library website, wherever you like to go for books. All right, everyone, it is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.